Buonasera a tutte. Hi everyone. Welcome to this episode of DONNECHEAMMIRO in the World. My name is Eleonora Tafuro Ambrosetti. I'm a researcher in international politics, and here I am today, joined by another researcher in international politics and a researcher that I have been knowing for some time, although I don't actually know her. I've never met her in person, but we follow each other on Facebook, and I admire very much her work as a researcher, as well as her engagement in her country's politics. And let me introduce you to Maryia Rohava. She's a researcher, as I told you, about international politics and authoritarian regimes, above all. She writes a lot about the post-Soviet region in general, and especially on Belarus, which is a country that has been grabbing international attention over the last few months, because there is an ongoing revolution against and protests against the current president, Alexander Lukashenko. But Maryia, why don't you introduce yourself to our group and tell us a little bit more about your work and you as a person, where you're from, where did you grow up, and how would you define yourself?
Hi everyone, thank you for joining us for this interview. My name is Maryia, and I'm a Belarusian, so I was born and raised in the country that is right now ongoing, where you can see that right now there is an ongoing protest and political crisis, that is Belarus. I'm a researcher and specializing on area studies, focusing on post-Soviet region. I worked internationally, mostly focusing on European politics and authoritarian regimes. Right now, I think I kind of gained the status of a political commentator who speaks about the ongoing protest in Belarus in particular, and hoping to engage more proactively in political analysis and political consultation in the country that are happening right now. As a researcher, also an academic researcher, so I worked extensively with in kind of area studies perspective, so in post-Soviet politics, looking into identity building, nation building, and kind of symbolic politics of this region, and how it actually happened, how it actually these processes happen in authoritarian context, with my case as Belarus looking very intensely through different kind of levels, from institutional to more citizens to elites, so different groups that I cover in my own academic analysis.
So how would you say your personal context, your social context and personal experience impacted on your research? Basically, it was an intellectual curiosity that grew because of your background, or is it something that, I don't know, you decided to study at a later stage for other reasons?
Well, it was actually, I should have answered your previous questions. I was born in a medium kind of city, which was a regional center in Belarus, but not in Minsk. So it was the city with a long history, but which was very much impacted by this Soviet industrialization. So when I was growing up, I was surrounded mostly by factories and World War II commemorative memorials. There was nothing really kind of building anything into my identity. So I was very much inclined to go somewhere abroad for my studies. So I ended up, for my bachelor studies, I ended up in Vilnius, where there was a university in established by Belarusians, so it was European Humanities University. So I ended up doing my bachelor's there. And there was quite a lot of conditioned by the regime in this university. It was early 2000. In early 2000, this university was exiled from Belarus. So it was established by very young, ambitious, and democratically leaning people who established this university, and they wanted to provide this kind of liberal arts type of education. So it, of course, impacted me in a significant way, shaping a lot of my political identity, my political ideas, and as well like the way I was thinking and approaching different research. I joined a small political science program, which was back then quite, starting just from ground up. It was very small, but still led by one of the most prominent, I would say, people in political research in Belarus, who were just starting up a program, building from scratch studies on institutional building in Belarus and constitutional aspects on comparative politics. So I think I was quite inspired by them, but at the same time, still not able to reflect how it actually impacted me. Because when you're studying, you're just kind of grasping all these ideas, but still not going very deep into understanding what it actually meant for your own identity. And only after some time, when I ended up in Oslo, I finally kind of went back and started to understand and grasp the meaning of what it actually means to grow up in authoritarian regime. And this is kind of inspired my own research into how citizens actually live in this environment, how they engaged with politics in this situation, how critical they can be, and how their daily life is impacted by the regime. So I think it just came like in different ways. Of course, there were quite a lot of build up to that moment, but it only came later, I would say, in my academic research.
And how would you think of your activity as a female researcher in the different contexts that you've been working in? Because I mean, you've been traveling quite a lot, and you've been seeing different work environments. How would you say that your being a woman researcher impacted on your work in these different countries?
I think it was also quite different environments you go through. I started in Lithuania, then I went to the Netherlands and to Spain, then to Norway, and then back to Belarus. So there were a lot of different contexts where being a woman and being a professional impacts your professional identity quite different, but there was quite a similar denominator in this, that it's still quite tough to establish yourself as a professional in, especially kind of focusing on Eastern Europe or like Western Europe, Russia, I would say. So in Norway, I came rather young and realized that basically even professional identity for a woman is very hard to establish. I ended up recently listening to one of the presentation talking about leaking pipe. And I think that's what I kind of observed, that many young women end up doing a PhD and progressing to a junior level, but then a leaking pipe happens, so that many actually end up not proceeding further into kind of more senior positions. So this kind of jump is really hard to achieve, especially for a woman. How do you progress from a junior to a senior position was quite challenging, and that kind of made me think as well about gender role in this perspective, that women end up embracing quite diverse and a very ambitious role. They have to be mothers. No matter of your sexual preferences, for example, you still have to perform certain role as a parent in Norwegian society. At the same time, you have to be a very good professional, so you have to publish quite a lot and being engaged in different level as a very expertise-driven person.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of it, you still have to keep yourself in a very good form, and you have to be active, sport-oriented person, because you have to engage. So it was these different roles that are put on you, and it becomes quite challenging.
So yeah,
But
you get a lot of pressure on you, basically.
yeah, I think so. And I think for this, it was important to create, meaningful networks. And what you realize as well, that those meaningful networks, professional networks for women, are quite problematic, because they're so fragile in this context, especially in professional context, because they work only as long as they don't contradict a certain kind of competition, because competition and cooperation stand almost side by side. And when this network, your professional network, is much impacted by competition, when you end up competing against each other, competition takes over rather than cooperation and helping each other. And I think that kind of shows a different element of what what we are trying to build, I think, right now with new kind of professional environments. When we are trying to promote female network and trying to promote women to cooperating with each other, because those kind of it's a very meaningful connection that has to to challenge those roles that women originally play in different professional environments, and they have to break those chains of competing as well against each other.
And would you say like these networks are rather regional or country level, or are more international, let's say at the European level, or even like globally?
I think it depends. I mean, in essentially, I was referring mostly now to academic research kind of circles. Those were international, but I also now thinking much closer home, because I could see now that with what was happening inside the country, we were really trying to build a different perspective as well on women cooperation, because we were trying to, as well, to change a bit the image of the country, what women cooperation can do. And I saw diverse initiative on embracing, this sisterhood and their possibilities of creating this professional network, but it's still quite, it's not, I mean, it's a different context, and then you kind of face different hurdles to jump. But in professional academic context, I would say it's still quite international. In Norway, it's also very much what really influenced your professional ambition and professional career is the domestic context. So it's very important to build the domestic network and support, and this very much linked to the roles that you play in society. So it again goes back very much to whether you're a parent, whether you're a good sports woman, for example, whether you can play a good role as an administrator, for example. So it really very much linked to quite ambitious roles that are put on a woman in professional environment.
Yeah, let's focus more on the domestic context that you were mentioning. The citizens' political engagement is a very important part in your research. Is it also an important part in your daily life? I mean, does it play a role? Do you belong to any political organizations? Do you perform some political roles in your society?
I think it's kind of it has changed quite a lot, because I ended up returning to Belarus in March, so before the main kind of the first wave of lockdowns due to COVID. So I was in Belarus from March till December, the end of November of 2020. So I think my role was basically very much conditioned by what I have observed in the country. So I felt in that moment that I could not stay out of the political developments. But again, I could only use my international platform to speak out rather than the domestic one. I think I was quite excluded from the domestic context, and building it from the ground up felt not possible at that moment, because there are so many things coming up, and you felt it was already quite diverse, and my contribution would not be so meaningful as it was at the international kind of discussions. So I focused mostly my kind of expertise on reaching out to more international platforms, trying to give some interviews, quite a lot of interviews, and
and very good ones. I mean, you were kind of acting as a bridge between the international community, expert community, and the local one.
Yeah.
And this was a very much appreciated role.
Yeah,
I think.
that's what I kind of figured out at that moment, that the domestic context was covered very much, but by existing kind of Telegram channels, for example, that what Belarusians used to reach the information that they needed at that moment. And my role was mostly linking it to more international audience and to kind of international newsletters that are very much tempted to reproduce certain images and certain kind of narratives. And you wanted to break away from that and show a bit more diversity in that. And I think this is why new voices, including mine, I think were quite important in trying to present a much more diverse picture of what was happening on the ground.
And do you think that these interviews or the things that you write and the topics that you research on may cause any possible harm to you or to your family at this particular moment in time in Belarus? Because I mean, the political situation is getting worse and worse for activists and researchers alike. So I mean, is it something that worries you?
I think it just from August I was worried that at any moment something could happen. So, but I don't think that it was something that, you know, unique to in my situation. I realized that basically so many people shared the same kind of fear. So I was not as well. I was not sure how much my profile was visible to kind of the people concerned, basically, with political situation. I think mostly they were trying to put screws to people who had a quite public profile inside Belarus, so domestic context. But at the same time, I mean, at some point it felt there was no discrimination. There was anyone who they could find would end up serving time, or at least serving 14 days for participating in a rally or something like that. So there was really, it was definitely a question of time and your visibility. As long as you stay visible, at some point it could definitely use it against you or your family, or you definitely compromise as well and put in danger maybe not yourself but also some of your family members, because that's your pressure point. So sometimes they don't arrest you, but then they arrest people close to you. So all those kind of elements, I think, give you the kind of brings this fear every day. Like you wake up knowing that this could happen. So yeah, I think the combination of those factors definitely gave me quite a lot of worry. Plus, I think I was also. I think once I wrote it already in Twitter, but I also was lucky because I ended up learning so much about Belarusians, because I rented my flat in a very famous now Minsk place. Not famous, but still, it's a place where it's a building block where people felt quite united, and they organized different local initiatives and just generally raised your spirit every day. So you felt very much encouraged by their kind of everyday brave acts. And so you kind of a bit lived with this kind of brave community that inspired as well you every day. So I think that was quite significant as well, what motivated me as well to speak out.
And the role of women in this process was very much a topic in international media, and in Italy as well. There were a lot of articles describing these brave women, and also showing pictures. And of course, the main political opponents are women, and many journalists were asking the question, why in a country that is labeled as patriarchal and kind of not very progressive, how come women are leading the revolution? So how would you assess, first of all, this assessment? Do you think it is correct that women led the revolution and are leading the revolution? And what's your opinion on this?
I think I agree that it's a bit much more, I mean, it's more complex than it has been portrayed in the media, because despite what we see in the picture, the society still remains quite conservative. It's even the public opinion survey confirm quite, patriarchal leaning of the society. So to challenge this and to bring this narrative was a significant event, and I hope those narratives will be challenged in the future. The patriarchal narrative of a woman, or for women participation in general in Belarusian society. But I think overall women played a key role because they present something that is quite evident in this political system, that it's not just women that women are discriminated, but they are also discriminated as everyone in their political rights. So women present a certain kind of narrative explaining that a significant group of Belarusian society is completely discriminated and their political rights are taken away. But it doesn't mean that, and it kind of applies to the entire society. And I think this is kind of motivated as well as this mobilization. But, and as well, I mean, other kind of studies also indicate that women engagement is quite important because they also help to maintain the protest on a kind of on a peaceful, in a peaceful, resistant manner. And that we also have observed that the engagement of women and involvement of women help to maintain the peaceful wave of the civil resistance, and maintained it for quite a long time. So
yeah, because women, also, sorry to interrupt, because also
yeah,
there were a lot of women that I saw protesting were kind of playing on their standard society role, like the mothers, the grandmothers,
yeah.
Like bringing flowers to policemen. So I mean, there was this sort of element. Yes, I am a woman and I want to protest against the government and against discrimination, but at the same time I am coming here as a mother, as a grandmother, as like playing the role that society kind of gave me. So it is correct.
Absolutely, I agree. Just they don't challenge the gender norms that are already put the society puts on them. They just play along with those norms, but they just say that. And I don't think that there is any kind of significant political agenda that push for actually women's rights. It's really kind of not even part of the conversation at this moment. At this moment, the entire conversation is this kind of restoration of certain institutional norms, of electoral norms in the society. So all other aspects were, I think, even beyond this kind of discussion. So yes, women's role was significant, but we should not really overestimate its significance in this way. But at the same time, I think looking at those images, I felt incredibly proud, because it's a significant sacrifice as well because you basically women participation has a lot of vulnerability because of their societal roles. They're mothers, so there are also different pressure points that can be used against them, and were used actually against them. So as a parent or as a main caretakers, they're vulnerable in this way, and this is why their kind of political involvement was always limited in this societal space. So yeah, challenging it would be quite a significant task for the future.
Well, yeah, let's hope for the best. Now I want you to use your crystal ball and tell me a little bit about the future of Belarus. I mean, how do you evaluate the current situation, and how do you think it will evolve in the short to medium term?
To be honest, if I had that crystal ball, I would really like to use it at this moment. But I realize that it's just, it's a very difficult task of predicting anything in such a kind of contentious politics, where there is so many kind of elements that are kind of for you they are kind of a black box, and you have to guess what is this in this black box, because really all the decision making are happening kind of by the elites who represent this black box, and it's very kind of hard to grasp where they're leaning. I think what I can say is that right now they are waiting, because they know that they cannot bring any kind of type of reform, because they just don't have any kind of possibilities of implementing them in the current climate. So they just will still continue using repressions and to maintain or contain, basically not to maintain, but to contain the protests.
But what do you think the role of the EU as well as other international actors, especially the US now with Joe Biden, could be? Do you think the international community could and should do more, or should rather, wait and see and not interfere too much with the political developments?
To be honest, I was recently was willing to think about it, like that Europe really has to do more in terms of like EU has to create some new lines of acceptable behavior, because what we have observed, not just from Belarus but from Russia, for example, recently, that just any lines can be crossed and they just go unpunished, and there is no role the EU actually has able to create for itself, because symbolic messaging in terms of, we don't accept and we strongly advise, those are no longer bring any kind of results. Maybe not even results, but I would say response. Like they don't even need to respond to them anymore. That's kind of becomes a new norm of EU and Belarus or Russia engagement. And this is why EU really has to rethink its role and rethink its place, or not even its place in this international relations, but also how it actually sees these countries in the future. Or how they see their future engagement with this country. Will it always be a crisis-driven responses? So there is a political crisis, and now we have to find a solution. And all the solutions are so much delayed that they just don't have any significant value on the political situation in the country. So, and I think there are as well lots of kind of domestic EU politics that are part of this kind of puzzle. I mean, what we as well see how Poland and Hungary can push the norms of acceptable behavior is also part of this puzzle. If they are able to capture media, if they are able to capture courts, why, for example, then how this kind of messages of condemnation from the EU can impact such autocracies as Belarus and Russia. They will just continue and push this red line of acceptable behavior. So people will get arrested, they will be killed, and still we will see European public officials coming to Belarus and hugging in this kind of situation. And this is just, for me, I think a significant need to rethink this.
Well, I mean, sometimes public pressure does achieve something. For example, I'm thinking of the hockey world championship that was supposed to be held in Belarus, and due to international pressure, this mega event was cancelled. In the end, it will be celebrated in another country. Do you think these types of actions are useful actually, or maybe counterproductive?
No, I mean, the problem is that it also came with such a delay. You know, for me, it would not be even an issue. But I mean, it took quite a lot of lobbying from different grassroots organizations from Belarus, pressuring sponsors to withdraw from sponsoring the event, to finally kind of finish it off, to kind of give this decision. But this is quite a lot of, public policy and public lobbying behind this, and I don't think that it needed to be, considering that it could have been unilaterally decided already in October or even earlier, put it this way. So, but I mean, this is what I mean with all of this is kind of responding with such a delay. And I'm wondering what this delay actually do to in the political crisis, which requires a much quicker responses to have an impact on the political situation. So if those decisions came maybe a bit, simultaneously in October or even in September, could they have shifted a bit the playing field or leveled it up a bit for protesters and the regime? Possibly, or maybe not, but it's nothing that right now we can figure out. The same now with the case of Navalny. It's also could be a great challenge for the EU to see if they can come up actually with something more than just messages or symbolic kind of responses.
So, the very last question, Maryia. Do you see your future in Belarus, or where do you see yourself in the next 5 to 10 years?
That's quite interesting, right?
I know. I wouldn't know how to answer myself.
I think I kind of, to be honest, okay, I'll start from August. I ended up participating in one of the biggest rally. The one, if you ever interested in Googling Belarus, you might be lucky to find the pictures on the 16th of August, where after, so many days of violence, people took over the streets of Minsk, and it ended up, taking over one of the big avenues. And so I was one of them, and walking together with some colleagues and friends, I realized their faces, their inspiration. It just was I wish I would be part of that new Belarus with people smiling and those professionals who I admire so much. And in that moment, I thought that, yes, I want to be part of that type of Belarus. But the problem is that we just really have to find that place for ourselves, because I think the current version of Belarus is just so outdated, and I really don't see my place there. And if it changes, then I certainly will be able to find a professional and personal place in that new Belarus. But for the moment, I think I will try to create myself a path of staying in a political consultancy or political kind of research. Maybe more independently, not in academia, but working for different think tanks, as well focusing on Eastern Europe and Belarus.
I see. Well, thank you so much for sharing all these insights with us. It was really nice to see you and to listen to your story. Thank you everyone for following. Grazie, buona serata. Ci vediamo presto in un altro episodio. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you for inviting me.